William Nylander was at Smashfest last night and said something that really, I don't think it's that much of a surprise. And people in this market, of course, a player like that talks about his contract. It's news right away. But Nylander saying that he wants to sign a long-term deal here in Toronto instead of a bridge deal, which to me makes sense because he wants the security, he wants more dollars. And what kind of contract are we looking at here for William Nylander? Because when I look at the comparatives, when I look at a contract like David Pastrnak at 6 years at 36, to me, at this point in their careers, David Pasternak's a better player. And I know William Nylander still has a ton of upside, and you hope that he can outplay his contract. But what kind of dollar figure are we talking about for a guy like William Nylander if, in fact, he is going to sign a long-term deal with the Leafs?
Yeah, and you're right, George, that there is no surprise about that. I was a little bit, I wouldn't say surprised, but earlier when it seems that Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner, both say they're willing to kind of wait another year and not get ahead of the curve trying to get their deal for starting next season done. But, yeah, Nylander's case, so here's the thing. There's apparently is enough money for everybody, apparently. Now, that's why James Van Riemsdyk went. That's why Tyler Bozak went. That's $12 million in next year's salary they signed elsewhere for. Now, a lot of that got taken by John Tavares making 11. So you have a free year this year for whatever Nylander makes or whatever guys make in general. Then next year is the problem year because you have Matthews kicking in, you have Marner kicking in, and the last year that Patrick Marleau contract, which I find that being the real niggling point that could make it problematic. But that's a year down the road. Money-wise, Tom Wilson, throw him in the mix. 6 years, a little bit over $5.1 million as well. What he signed with the Washington Capitals. A couple of years ago, out of the blue, Lou Lamoriello signed both Morgan Riley and Nazem Kadri to these kind of contracts, right? And I know, so we're looking a few years later for William Nylander to get that kind of money, but I think the Pastrnak money is what he would be looking for. And, it's not unreasonable when you're eating up those many years. So I think the Leafs, there are not the question marks about committing to Matthews, Marner, Nylander. This is 2 years that these guys have all had solid seasons, and they feel that they can all get them under the fold. But I think that's the kind of money, George, that you're talking about. I think that's a very good comparable.
I know out of those three with the Maple Leafs scored, and again, to me, Nylander out of Marner, Matthews, and is the guy that maybe, and he's not a question mark to me, but he'd be the guy I'd be most worried about giving him a long-term deal. Would you be? You think that would maybe be the thinking behind Dubas? I think Nylander's a guy who's going to be a good player for a lot of years, but of those three, to me, he seems like the guy with the biggest question mark potentially.
Absolutely, and that's where I think Mike Babcock's done a good job challenging him and working on his two-way play. And it's a lot what we were saying about Nazem Kadri a few years ago as well. And then you look when he made that next step forward. So so when I say worry, yeah, but it would still be an asset that you could trade. Maybe unload if it worst came to worst, but still would be something that you could move if worst came scenario happened. But you really got to hope you don't get like Edmonton where you got all, clogged up and you had to move a Taylor Hall and then you've got a Milan Lucic was a overpaid free agent. Then you likely went bigger on Leon Draisaitl than you should have. And I don't think that's the case in these three guys' cases. But I agree that of the three, if you're ranking them, Marner would be the one with maybe arguably a few more question marks.
Yeah, one of the other contracts that people look to when they think of Nylander and the money that he could possibly get would be Nikolai Ehlers from Winnipeg, the 7-year, $42 million extension that he got. Because over the last 2 years, their points are very comparable. 122 for Nylander over the past 2 seasons versus I think it's 124 for Ehlers over that span as well. But that money is going to be assigned this year regardless. We're going to find out where that lies. If Auston Matthews doesn't get his contract done and decides to play out his rookie deal, what kind of money are you looking at for him? Because you have Connor McDavid, who got his massive deal, got $100 million bucks. Then you have someone like Jack Eichel, who got slightly less, $80 million, 8-year extension for both of them. Does Matthews fall in the middle, or will he be looking at McDavid money?
Yeah, and of course, Ehlers, you said, yeah, that's the $6 million figure as well. So that's a good applicable one as well, Ashley. And this is the not the $1 million question. I guess is it the $11 million question? Is it whatever it may be? Connor McDavid took 12.5 and arguably left money on the table. You might wonder at the end of the year when he picked up the Ted Lindsay Trophy why he left that money on the table, because he was a one-man show out on a team that didn't make the playoffs. Off the top of my head, I don't know Auston Matthews nor his agent's mindset that they're one of those people that want to knock it out of the park and go for the 12, 13, 14 million if they can, or right off the top, I say, okay, he gets the same as John Tavares would be my thinking right off the top. That would be it. So the $11 million mark, 10 to 11 would be what I'm thinking of for Auston Matthews as far as locking him up 8 years.
And it's funny because you talk about how a young Jim Benning, for example, was sitting down watching Marlies practice day in and day out when he had any free time. We all know that Auston Matthews' path to the NHL has been very unorthodox, extremely different, especially for someone of his caliber. And I always wonder with him what his motivation is. You have people that are like, I just want to play the game. I just want to win titles. I want to win Stanley Cups. And then you have some athletes who, and fair enough, are just, I want to get as much money as I can for my short playing career. So to say that you don't know the mentality or the motivation from Matthews and his agent, it's interesting to me because he's a different kind of player than we've seen, especially when you think about his development.
Great point. And the fact that he played over in Europe, right, for Mark Crawford over there, rather than playing NCAA or playing junior. And, the great story about the illustrious Quebec Pee Wee Carnival, the #1 marquee Pee Wee hockey tournament. And he gets parachuted with a team that nobody speaks English on the team, and Auston Matthews scores like a hat trick in Quebec City for this team where nobody speaks English, and he's their star player. That you're absolutely right about. There's just been all kinds of different paths he's traveled, and even when we look at Vladdy Guerrero Jr., for example, and we talk about guys coming more so his dad and others, but coming from rags to riches, say from the Dominican and that to play Major League Baseball. Well, these are guys that there was baseball down there. They were just desperate and passionate to try to get out and play. This guy, there was really no hockey there. He just decided, I want to play hockey. And he damn well became the best player playing hockey out of a place where minor league hockey basically didn't exist, in Phoenix, Arizona. Like it's an incredible mindset and motivation for a kid to make that kind of decision. Then along the way, play over in Europe and do some other things. So he definitely has chosen to do things his way. Again, I don't know at the end of the day, does that money-wise, is he a guy that's saying, yeah, I got to get top dollar and make a splash that way? I got to think there's an element of team concept in him. The fact that he reached out to John Tavares to encourage him to come to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that's why when I'm thinking of a figure, I'm thinking of that figure because I think of that personality as well.
But Gord, how much is ego involved in all of this? And I know we all want to think that, Auston Matthews is going to be a good Maple Leaf guy. He's going to take less money to help the team win long term. But we hear all this captaincy talk, and I think he's a guy, and I'm assuming he thought he was going to eventually be the captain of the Maple Leafs. That might now go to John Tavares, and now he's going to take less money and not be in that upper echelon with Connor McDavid, because I'm sure he looks at himself in the same vein as Connor McDavid and should be getting paid accordingly. Ego has to play a part in this, doesn't it, at some point? If he's not going to be the captain, then I'm sure he's not going to take a little less money to appease the Maple Leafs. The Leafs can't have both in this situation, can they?
Well, we truly have no idea what the C means at age 20, 21 to Auston Matthews right now. And Bobby Orr tried to, dismiss that a little bit when he had his golf tournament so the media could go to talk to Bobby Orr, because that's the agency that represents him now, and just say, no, there are no issues that way about wearing the C. We've seen the C be a problem for Dion Phaneuf. We've seen the C be a problem for so many people in Toronto. Years ago, the Montreal Canadiens had two captains, one home, one away, because it was such a hot button topic, if you remember. So I take Kyle Dubas at his word at the John Tavares press conference that this has to be handled right. And if I'm Auston, I don't know how much the C means. Like Connor McDavid, is that fun answering questions every night about your crappy team?
That's what I was just going to say. You know how much more pressure is put upon you? And I think if someone like Auston Matthews, who just gets to play hockey, do his job, and have John Tavares, who's very good outwardly, very PR friendly, do all the talking, and Auston Matthews gets to be less in that role.
But these guys want that responsibility.
Not always.
But you want them to, because if they want to be upper echelon elite players, when they look at the greats of the games, what do you mean no? Wayne Gretzky was the guy who wore the C. Mario Lemieux wore the C. These guys look at themselves in that same vein, that they want to be superstar players.
No, but you think of them as like the great players first, and there's always an assumption you'll be a captain at some point. And I mean, if you're so let's say John Tavares becomes the captain next year. And then Auston Matthews can succeed him sometime down the road, hypothetically. I don't think it's as much as a hot button topic as the average. Everyone's consumed by it. Everyone asks me that question all the time. And I got to think, particularly nowadays, it's a different, it's a different role. You have agents. There's a collective bargaining agreement. You're better off having a leadership group. Trust me, I know that, rather than having, a captain without a strong leadership group around them. And I think that's the important part, that this was a toxic, bloody team. I mean, we're just writing in Toronto Joffrey Lupul's $5.25 million contract off when you talk about money for doing nothing for a few years. And he was part of a toxic, poor leadership environment in the dressing room. And that's something they've corrected in a big way. And that's the most important thing, that kind of core that seems to be there and seems to be growing.
Yeah, we just talked about how unorthodox Auston Matthews' path was to the NHL. I don't think he's someone who was sleeping in pajamas being like, I love this team so much. And so I understand what you mean by people want to be captains, and it can help define a legacy and put you in that great category. But I just think sometimes it can be overrated. And I don't think being an assistant is that much worse, especially in a market like Toronto.
So, Ashley, when you and I go in on George's Christmas present, an Auston Matthews sweater, we will get a C separately, and George can choose to sew it on or not if it makes him feel better. The wide-eyed Christmas Day opening that we want George to have.
If you listened to the show yesterday, I would not wear an Auston Matthews jersey because I'm older than he is. So that's kind of my rule.
Yeah,
rules are made to be broken.
George takes a hard line. He takes a hard line on that, to be sure.
And life in general, too. Real quick, too, Gord, before I let you go, Mitch Marner's contract, to me, potentially, could be a very interesting one, because if I'm Kyle Dubas and the Maple Leafs, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You sign John Tavares. He's an incredibly talented player. If he plays with Mitch Marner, guess what, Gord? Chances are, because Mitch Marner is so ridiculously skilled, he might have a monster season. It's not out of the realm of possibility, Gord. Mitch Marner could potentially challenge Connor McDavid for the scoring title next year. And if he does, what kind of money are we talking for Mitch Marner's contract extension?
So that's a quantum leap. It's not you're not smoking funny stuff. Which I guess there is no funny stuff anymore. Everything's good.
No, yeah, it's legal apparently in October. Yeah,
that's right. But okay, that's called a very happy predicament. Okay,
it's good problems. Of course it is. Yeah, but it could happen.
Yeah, but also, and that's why, to me, even though Marner and Matthews both say they're willing to wait a year, if I'm Kyle Dubas, I'd want to kind of get it all figured out a year in advance. I have no idea if the Marner cap or Matthews cap would be amenable. I mean, Eichel did it, and McDavid did it. A number of other guys have done it. Older players like Carey Price did it a year in advance. So I don't know. But, yeah, down the road, well, then you start running in. But, again, you want to get in that situation like Pittsburgh has with Malkin and Crosby and Letang and then Kessel. You want to get in that situation. Hey, Washington had to do some sculpting. And they kept Kuznetsov, and they were able to keep the right kind of guys that they to finally get to the promised land. The problem is when you're done, you're the Chicago Blackhawks, and then all of a sudden Jonathan Taves and those kind of contracts are looked as too much of a drag on the salary cap. But the guy won 3 cups. So you can't be pissed off at him. So anyway, if Mitch Marner challenges Connor McDavid for the scoring title, I'd love to have that problem. I wouldn't be doing radio right now if I had that problem.
Then you'd have Mitch Marner complaining outwardly to the media that he's not the captain, that he wants a referendum, that he wants a recount of the votes.
Well, but I'll tell you something. I don't know about the Marner camp, how much they want to make a splash money-wise, because he's had an agent that doesn't have a lot of clients that I know wants to make a bit more of a splash that way. So, I mean, those ones you never know. So we shall see.